All right. Well, thank you very much, Patrick, and thank you for inviting us. I am delighted to sit around the table with the president of the African Development Bank, who has been the biggest advocate of the organization that I'm running. So it is important to understand that advocacy plays a major role in what we're trying to do over here. Let me make 4 points, and starting with what I find extremely uplifting as messages, with the hope that those messages will carry us to COP26. And second, say a few words about the human aspect of climate change, which hasn't been talked about quite often, but also what the African Union is doing to the organization to lead, working with the African Development Bank. And then obviously come to the big, bold idea that Patrick has tasked us to work on. I think on the messages, I was very uplifted by what I heard from the Secretary General, and that is that in Africa, no one should be left behind, because ultimately, that is really the purpose of this exercise, to make sure that no one is left behind. I think the second message that I find extremely uplifting as well is that our mission ultimately has to be about protecting life and protecting livelihood. And that is the only indicator that will actually determine that we've been successful in what we're doing here around the table. And last but not least, as a message, we have no choice to multitask. There is no adaptation and then mitigation and resilience. We can do 3 things at the same time, and the world imposing on us to do 3 things at the same time. So while we're looking at big ideas on adaptation, we need to make sure there are vulnerable communities across Africa expecting us to make a difference in protecting them. I think second point I want to make is that, yes, it's important to think about the big ideas, but let's also think about the vulnerable communities that are affected by food security, selling their assets to survive. So ultimately, when we talk about climate change, let's bring it down to that level. You begin then to see the impact of drought and flooding and tropical cyclone on Africa and across the board, so we have no choice but to deliver and making sure that we're actually saving lives as we proceed. I think third point to make, and that is really about leadership. Africa is not just waiting for the international community to come to our rescue, and I think the African Development Bank president has made it very clear he's leading. But the organization I'm also leading was established by the African Union, entirely dedicated to making sure Africa shows that it is possible to have an institution entirely dedicated to making sure we protect the life and livelihood of many Africans affected by climate change. But our organization also is an example that actually partnership works. It's not just about Africa leading. In addition to the African Union, there are many organizations around this table. They have contributed resources in making sure that we can support African countries to be more resilient. What I want to highlight, and which hasn't been talked about here, and that is the approach that we're taking, which is very holistic. It's not just about providing financial resources. It's also making sure that we help Africans to have a better visibility on the risk profile so that they can decide to either retain some of the risk or to transfer some of the risk to the insurance market so they can raise additional financing. So technical assistance and capacity building is as important as providing financial resources. So it's important in our approach, we also dedicate some resources to capacity building and technical assistance so that in the long run, the Africans will become less and less dependent on us, but we build the capabilities within African countries to deal with disaster risk management as well. I also want to highlight something that the Minister of Norway mentioned earlier, and that is the importance of monitoring and evaluation, because ultimately, whatever we provide, we have to be able to go back and make sure that the funding goes directly to the communities that have been affected by the disasters. And that's why it's important we have a track system whereby we can support and show that actually what we do can make a difference. My big, bold idea is the following.
Bold is good, short is even better.
Right, it's bold, big, and short. And that is that it's important that if we can set up an African premium financing facility working with AAAP to provide the necessary subsidies so that African countries can actually afford our subsidies and transfer the risk. The African Development Bank is already doing it, but we could do more around the table to make sure we support Africa, make Africa more